Luka splits a double. Keeps the dribble alive. All the way to the hoop. Scoop to the hoop with a foul. Point 71 and 72.
And one.
Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me for this episode exclusively on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. Make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And if you listen to the podcast, you can get that podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating or write a review for it while you're there. And you can find it on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And remember, Inside the Mavs is the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. I was trying to enjoy my day off as the Mavericks are off just like me as they get ready to take on the Detroit Pistons on Friday night in their final home game of the regular season after they dispatched the Miami Heat on Wednesday night in a 19-point victory that gave the Mavericks a 50-30 record, a season-high 20 games above 500, a team that's 16-2 in their last 18 games, a team during that 18-game span has the best defense in the NBA, a team that's won 24 of their last 31 games and 5 straight overall as they have locked up, of course, a top 5 seed in the Western Conference to set up a trilogy with the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs, and a team that is the talk of the NBA locally and nationally because of how successful this team has been in the way that they've dominated throughout the last couple of months. And then I remember, all right, this is the Mavericks, and there's always going to be the conversation around Luka Dončić, who is a legitimate MVP candidate. And yes, for me, the NBA's MVP. And for some, though, not necessarily. And one thing that we'll discuss here in our time today that's bothered me most about the Luka Dončić conversation, particularly for him as the NBA MVP this season, is that his candidacy is being treated with some kind of Johnny-come-lately mentality, as if Luka Dončić hasn't been putting up insane numbers all season long, some of which we'll go throughout the course of our time here today, because Luka Dončić helped this Mavericks team get off to a 9-3 start, a team that's 45-24 when he's played this year, a guy that's second in the NBA in value over replacement. He has obviously led the league in scoring at nearly 34 points per game, top 10 in steals, number 2 in assists, number 2 in made three-pointers. The numbers go on and on and on. The dizzying amount of numbers Luka Dončić has put up. And as you heard a little bit earlier, the fact that he had a 73-point game against the Atlanta Hawks. Don't forget he had a 50-point game on Christmas Day against the Phoenix Suns. Any number of games that you want to think of that have highlighted how great Luka Dončić has been, you can pick a litany of them and be able to use them as exhibit A's, B, and C for Luka Dončić as the NBA MVP. Now, look, let me preface my comments today by letting you know this. I do believe that Nikola Jokić is going to win his 3rd NBA MVP in the last 4 years. And it looks like, based on what we've seen from the straw poll of ESPN that Tim Bontemps puts out, that that's been decided for quite a while. And that's what bothers me about this discussion, is the fact that the MVP has been decided, it appears, for at least the last couple of months. And that is a major flaw when we have discussions around who the NBA MVP is and how we evaluate based on what a team is doing, what an individual player is doing for that team, and the definition that we assign the league's MVP. Is it the most outstanding player of a season? Is it the best player on the best team with the best record in the NBA? There are a number of ways that individuals have defined what the MVP is supposed to be, whether it be on wins, numbers combined with wins, and how that team is playing at a particular time throughout the course of the season or during a specific time frame. But any way you slice it for Luka Dončić, he has met every single metric that people have assigned that he needs to achieve or put his team in position to do in order to be considered a legitimate MVP candidate and actually the NBA's MVP for this season. And no matter what happens in the MVP race this year, with Nikola Jokić most likely winning, and hopefully for Luka Dončić a second-place finish, along with SGA, who I believe are the top 3 MVP candidates, whatever happens this year, going into next year, hopefully the groundwork and the framework, I should say, is laid and the foundation is laid for Luka Dončić to come out of the gate once again as the MVP favorite. You say, Kevin, over the last couple of years, Luka Dončić has been the betting favorite coming into the NBA season, and his team has not been able to have the kind of success, or at times he has missed games that's not allowed him to remain in that conversation. Of course, last year, the Mavericks finished at 38-44, nowhere near the playoffs, and for Luka Dončić, a disappointing year in not making the postseason. But going forward for him and this team, now that they've won 50 games for the second time in the last 3 years, of course, in the first year of Jason Kidd's tenure with the Mavericks, taking them to the Western Conference Finals after they won 52 games, and now having another 50-win season after bouncing back after last year's disappointment in missing the postseason, Luka Dončić will always be a perennial MVP candidate, and the numbers will always continue to put him in that category. But what I want folks to start doing going forward when you're evaluating who you believe the NBA MVP candidate is, look at the totality of the season. I put a question out there on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and I said, look, I know Nikola Jokić is the favorite to win the NBA MVP, but why isn't Luka the MVP this year? And I had a ton of different answers, a lot of which varied the spectrum in terms of the way that Luka's perceived by the referees, how he's perceived by the media, how he's perceived around the league. But I didn't find an argument strong enough to be able to dissuade me that Luka isn't the MVP. You say, Kevin, of course you're going to say that because you cover the Mavericks and you cover Luka Dončić all the time. Just because I do, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wrong. And here's one of the arguments that really bothered me when it came to a lot of things that have bothered me about this discussion, is the fact that we're trying to make up for an MVP that Nikola Jokić didn't receive last year because Joel Embiid closed the way that he did in order to win the MVP and not have Nikola Jokić win a third straight MVP, and then he goes on to win the NBA Finals MVP and championship, that we got to make up for it in the 23-24 season to correct the mistake that we made last year. The MVP is based off of that individual season and that particular player's performance to help his team not only win, but put up the kinds of numbers and define the value that would define what an MVP looks like. And Luka Dončić has done that in so many different facets, in so many different ways. Let's look at it. Whether you slice it from a defensive standpoint, top 10 in steals this year, one of the best isolation defenders in the NBA. From a scoring standpoint, leads the NBA in scoring, most points, rebounds, and assists combined since the merger. Any way that you look at it, whether it be 40-point triple-doubles, 45-point triple-doubles, all kinds of numbers, most 30-point triple-doubles since the MVP year of Russell Westbrook. You can use any statistic that you want to define Luka as the NBA's MVP. And honestly, it may not be that close. But yes, it is close in my humble opinion because of what Nikola Jokić and the advanced numbers that he has and has put up, whether it be offensive plus minus, defensive plus minus, overall plus minus. Nikola Jokić in a lot of the nerd numbers is actually doing the kind of thing that would make him the most valuable in the league. But the MVP race is a lot closer than what it should be and what it's defined to be based on where we are. More on this after we hear from our sponsor of today's podcast and our video, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, our mini-sode here exclusively on YouTube at Kevin Gray Sports as we discuss the candidacy of Luka Dončić as the NBA's MVP and the incredible numbers that he's put up this year as the Mavericks, of course, have gotten to 50 wins on the year. The Mavericks #1 in terms of clutch winning percentage in the NBA and the 6th best record in the entire association. Sounds like an MVP to me based on the kind of winning that the Mavericks have done. And that's another talking point of this whole MVP discussion when it comes to Luka Dončić. It feels like the goalpost has been moved quite a bit when it comes to discussing how he is or is not the league's MVP this season. And for me, as much as I obviously watch this team and cover this team and talk about this team, it's not just about the numbers, but the way that this team has responded with him and the lineup and the amount of leadership that he has brought throughout the course of the year, stepping up and taking care of his body, putting himself in position to be able to play the most games that he has in his career and be the guy that's on the floor leading the charge every single night and being that consummate force that he is. And if you don't believe me and take my word for it, listen to Kyrie Irving, his superstar teammate, as Kyrie Irving makes the case for Luka Dončić as he spoke post-game on Wednesday after the Mavericks defeated the Miami Heat. Listen to Kyrie Irving as he makes the case for Luka Dončić as the league's MVP and why.
Man, it was a statement, but we all knew how special this year was going to be. And I say we just in that locker room, the organization, we knew how special this year was going to be just based on our practices, what Luka was doing, showcasing that all the time, really being more vocal, challenging his teammates, challenging me, and doing it in his own way. And I think that's a true sign of MVP, of coming into a season and really initiating himself into that leadership role and doing it on both ends of the floor. His stats speak for themselves. He's first in, a lot of different categories. He's, held the team up when I wasn't able to be in the lineup and I was injured. So there are a lot of factors that attribute to his MVP case. And me as a brother of his, I have the utmost love and support to give him during this time because I want to see him win MVP. If it's not going to be this year, it's going to be in the eventual future, in the near future. He's mastered different nuances of the game, and he's continuing to explore his abilities and his talents, and it's beautiful to be a part of. So, the shirts mean a lot to us to represent him, but I think the most important thing he wants to do is win, and he's always put that first. So he has a huge responsibility on this team every night. He knows it, and it's our job as brothers to make sure that we alleviate him of some of those responsibilities and make sure he knows that we have his back, and we know how special he is.
So that's Kyrie Irving discussing the impact that Luka Dončić has had on this team this year, not just with his play on the floor, but the leadership on and off the floor as well. And we've talked about plenty about the chemistry that Luka and Kyrie have developed and how those two on and off the floor are growing together and having the Mavericks in the position that they are. But when you hear Kyrie Irving, who's played with an MVP teammate and a guy like LeBron James, speak about Luka Dončić in the glowing terms that he is, you understand how much Luka Dončić means to this team and to this franchise, and more importantly, to the league as a whole. A guy with a 61.7% true shooting percentage, a guy who, of course, has lifted the Mavericks to the 5th seed in the NBA playoffs in the Western Conference. The most consecutive 30-point triple-doubles, most consecutive 25-point triple-doubles. Again, the numbers that you can lay out for Luka Dončić and the value that he's brought to this team, you can pick and choose any of them and allow yourself to think that he is the league's MVP. And going forward for him, now he will be defined not just by what he continues to do in the regular season, as he'll be first team All-NBA for the 5th consecutive season, but how that translates obviously into postseason success, where he's already made a Western Conference Finals appearance. How much more deeper can he hopefully take this team in the playoffs? Well, you say, Kevin, if they are able to get past the Clippers in the first round and Denver hangs on to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, they may see Nikola Jokic as soon as the Western Conference semis. And again, this is no disrespect to the incredible season that Nikola Jokic has had, MVP worthy, based on what he's been able to do to help the Nuggets maintain the number 1 seed currently and be the reigning NBA champions with a terrific shot of defending that NBA championship and continuing to validate why he's one of the best players of our generation. But for me, looking at the totality of Luka Doncic's season, and again, that has to be the emphasis when it comes to how voters look at this particular award. It's not about what is done in the first 2 months of the season or the first 3 months of the season. How are we defining what a team is and the MVPs in the league based on the totality of the season? Because if we're going to make up our minds about who the MVP is a couple of months into the year without allowing the full body of work to be written and built throughout the course of the year, there's no point in doing this. But Luka Dončić has made one of the greatest closing arguments that we've seen in a long time. And you can go back to just last year and the way Joel Embiid was able to close in order to win the league MVP as well. So there's precedence here for an individual who's in the top 5 of their particular conference, a team that's got 50 wins, putting up the dizzying amount of numbers that Luka Dončić has put up. And one of the most impressive for him, the fact that we mentioned it a little bit earlier, second in made threes behind Stephen Curry. The fact that he's shooting over 10 threes per game, shooting nearly 39% from 3 throughout the course of the year on that kind of volume. And then you throw in the variety and the array of skill set that he has in the offensive end. He's the most unstoppable offensive player in the league today. He's a 3-level scorer who can get to the rim, devastate you in the mid-range, and now is knocking down 3-pointers at an efficient rate and getting to the free throw line, hitting nearly 80% of his free throws throughout the course of the season. There is nothing a defense can do to stop him. And oh, by the way, he's number 2 in the league in assists. So he's making his teammates better. He's an unstoppable offensive force, and his team is winning because of the style of play that he is leading for this team, and he's improved on the defensive end. What more do you want from a guy who's put up those kinds of numbers and, more importantly, have the impact on winning in the historic nature at which he's done it with the 73-point game that he had this year, the 4th most in NBA history? The argument is strong, and for me, the strongest in the league for the NBA MVP. And I hope for him that he's able to win it. But if not, yeah, the way that we have to continue to discuss this as we get toward the end of the regular season makes it clear and loud enough that going into next season, this is going to be the leading MVP candidate once again. And hopefully for the Mavericks, continue to do the winning at the kind of rate that allows him to remain in the conversation throughout the course of the year. Because for some folks who jumped into my mentions on Twitter have said, look, if they hadn't lost 5 or 6, Luka would be stronger in the MVP discussion, to which I say, what do you want the Mavericks to do? Win every single game throughout the course of the second half of the year? Because they've done it to the tune of 24-7 in their last 31 games and have been literally the best team in the NBA for nearly the last 20. And we're talking about pretty good sample sizes as we've gone through the rest of the regular season. So again, no matter how you may feel about the MVP candidacy of Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jason Tatum, or others, Luka Doncic's case is about as strong, if not the strongest in the league. We'll see if he's able to sway the voters' minds. Even Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, he said on Twitter after the game on Wednesday against the Miami Heat that he's reconsidering possibly voting for Luka Dončić as his league MVP. So you could see how Luka is changing the hearts and minds of voters down the stretch based off the incredible effort and play that he's put forward over the last 35 games. And that, to me, is a huge sign about the way that the Mavericks have won to allow Luka Dončić to be in this discussion. But if nothing else, Luka Dončić is putting together a season that we've never seen before in terms of averaging nearly 34 points per game, over 9 assists and over 9 rebounds per game. We've never seen that. That to me is yet another indicator of why Luka, for me, is the real NBA MVP. Appreciate you joining me here on this mini-sode of Inside the Mavs. Again, you can download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast for free. And make sure you like and comment on this video as well and subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports. Let me know your thoughts on Luka Dončić as the league's MVP and what his argument and his case should be in context of everything that we discussed here today. And then you can catch new episodes of Inside the Mavs every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcast for free. Again, my name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. I'll talk to you later. Peace.